we really have to talk about this because I was really shocked to see so many people that I respect and follow promoting this shamelessly and uncritically. It was such an obvious fake news story from the get. Look, I know we have not covered Iran. That's not because I have not wanted to cover Iran. It's because there's so much nuance there. We really have to be delicate with it and responsible, right? Because Iran is obviously in the crosshairs of the U.S. empire for regime change. That is not to say that I do not support women standing up against the morality police and this horrific repression that's going on, where obviously protesters are being hurt, arrested, and mass. That is an undisputed thing. I've heard horror stories about the morality police well before this all erupted. The problem is that because Iran, because there's not many legitimate news sources on the ground and not credible sources within Iran that are circulated and amplified by Western media, fake news stories could become viral very quickly and just add and pile on to the regime change shit. And that's exactly what happened.
And even worse, there's a lot of people who still have this story up. Like, they didn't even bother to retract it or correct it.
I saw this being circulated even by Amnesty International. Robbie. So it was Iran is planning to execute 15,000 protesters. 15,000 protesters sentenced to death by Iranian courts. And apparently, and this is also disputed, 15,000 people are who have been arrested for the protests. I have not confirmed that number, but it's just ludicrous to think that Iran would execute every single person who has been arrested. And it's just so shameless and embarrassing for entities like Amnesty International, which I really think the irresponsibility to promote something like this, it calls into question everything that they've done, right? And it makes you realize how we could just lap up, we as a society, Western media, just lap up anything about Venezuela, Cuba, North Korea, especially because it's so closed off, China. I mean, it's just cartoonish, Someone with any sort of faculty of critical thinking would read that headline and be like, that is not possible. It's just not possible.
And it's interesting.
But you saw Justin Trudeau, so many U.S. politicians, Robbie, Ted Lieu, the fucking Prime Minister of Canada.
So it all came from what they describe as a UK-based, Saudi-funded website called Iran International that put out a single tweet that just shows a picture of an Iranian parliamentary vote that says 227 members of the 290-seat parliament of Iran have called on the judiciary to issue death sentences for people arrested during the ongoing anti-government protests. And that's how it got started. So it's like, what is this website? I mean, you almost have to wonder, like, who is this, like a cutout, like, or is it just like a
no? It is a
tabloid.
Cutout.
Yeah, I mean, it's. But if it is a cutout, even still, you would think that some of these, like Newsweek, which I will say, Newsweek is a huge neocon propaganda outlet, but that's like, it just seems really irresponsible when that's the only source. I literally only saw one person who has been promoting the protests, actually retracted on Twitter. One guy.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, that's actually impressive. Yeah, because as you mentioned, multiple people have just let it sit. And, in this article, it talks about how further muddying the waters, the figure of the 15,000 protesters in the first place originates from an entity called the Human Rights Activists News Agency, which is a U.S.-based media arm of the National Endowment for Democracy. It's just totally crazy. It's like, look, obviously, people have the right to protest, right? And the fact that what is true, that Iran has sentenced one protester to death on charges of disturbing public peace and order because they burned some building down, is horrible. But to have, to conflate one person being charged with this penalty to 15,000 is just bizarre. Working at outlets like Newsweek, and it's embarrassing for a prime minister of a country to actually just amplify this uncritically. It's shocking for Amnesty to do it. People really look at Amnesty as kind of the arbiter of human rights around the world. And it's just absolutely bizarre. And it just really reveals how easy it is to manufacture fake news against U.S. adversaries. And like you said, it's so irresponsible on so many levels because there are legitimate grievances coming out of Iran and people's stories do need to be heard. And now it's just overshadowed and can be used to just be like, well, we don't believe anything. Or, it can be used for so many reasons to discredit so much because it's just been so eagerly shared.